For centuries, people were accused of controlling minds, causing illnesses, and conjuring unnatural forces. Most were innocent, but fear turned into fact, accusation became proof, and the word witch held the weight of a death sentence. Hi there, I'm Kelly, and this is Eerie Eats, where creepy stories and yummy recipes come together like confessions and casseroles. Today we're kicking off a new series called The Witching Hour, and it's all about, you guessed it, witches, and the dark, twisted, tangled roots of witchcraft, exposing the paranoia and persecution that wrapped around the lives of real women. And while we unravel that dark history behind the witch craze, I'll be making an herbal bread with garlic, sage, and rosemary. So let's get to it. Before the fear, there was familiarity. Magic healing and herbal knowledge were woven into daily life. They were trusted, not feared. But as belief shifted, so did perception, and the wise became suspicious, and every day became something darker. The idea of witches didn't start in one place or with one story. It was whispered across continents for centuries, woven into folklore, religion, law, and legend. But the panic, the executions, and the wide-scale witch hunts, that came later. So let's go back, not just to the 1400s, but even further. In ancient Greece and Rome, magic wasn't automatically evil. People used spells and charms for love, protection, healing. Curses existed too, but they were seen as a part of the same mystical toolbox. Women like pharmacies or striga, which were early versions of witches, were often midwives or herbalists. They had knowledge of plants, bodies, and the cycle of life and death. And for a while, that knowledge was respected, or at least tolerated. But time changes things. And as Christianity spread through Europe, older beliefs were slowly rebranded. Pagan gods became demons, folk healers became suspicious. And magic, the very idea of working with unseen forces, was cast as a threat. By the early Middle Ages, the church wasn't obsessed with witches just yet. In fact, in 785 AD, the church declared that believing in witches was superstitious nonsense. The idea that someone could fly at night or shapeshift into a wolf was seen as foolish folklore. But fear is persistent. By the 1400s, that tolerance was gone. And 1486, a book dropped into the world like a lit match in a dry haystack. The Malleus Maleficarum, Latin for the Hammer of Witches. Written by two German inquisitors, Henrik Kramer and Jacob Springer. The book was a brutal manual on identifying, trying, and punishing witches. And although it wasn't endorsed by the Catholic Church, it gained popularity across Europe. It claimed that witches could fly, cause storms, unalive babies, curse crops, destroy marriages, and the most terrifying of all, and I say this with as much sarcasm as I can muster, can witches dull the powers of generation? That translates to, could witches curse a man's ability to rise to the occasion? Yeah, that was a legitimate fear. They also questioned whether disbelief in witches in itself was heresy. In other words, if you denied witches exist, you might be a witch. That's kind of twisted. This marked a turning point. From the late 1400s to the 1700s, laws across Europe and colonial America began to change. And as the church's influence spread and patriarchal values solidified, older ways of knowing things, especially for women, were labeled dangerous. Healing herbs became witchcraft, independent women became suspicious, and suddenly control over knowledge, the body, and Even birth became a battleground, cloaked in righteousness. Laws began to punish witchcraft as a crime. Rumors became evidence. A bad harvest, spoiled milk, a sudden death could all result in accusations. So the blame had to fall somewhere, and the accused were mostly women who lived alone, the herbalist, the midwife, the widow, too smart for someone's liking, or simply different. Accusations became a weapon of power. The truth is that most of the accused had no real power. They weren't casting spells, they were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, and somebody didn't like them. In deeply patriarchal, highly religious societies, accusing someone of witchcraft gave people power over their enemies, over their fears, over things they couldn't explain, like disease, crop failure, infertility, or mental illness. And then add in a poor education, misogyny, inflated egos, and widespread superstition, and you have the perfect storm. As the fear spread, so did the violence. In places like Germany, France, Scotland, witch trials turned into mass executions. Entire towns were caught in hysteria. In one German region alone, 900 people were accused of witchcraft over just a few years. Witchcraft became an excuse, and it didn't end quickly. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Europe was not a place of peace. It was fractured, superstitious, devout, suspicious, and simmering just beneath the surface was a paranoia that was ready to boil over. The church wielded enormous influence, not just over the soul, but over law, medicine, science, and even who got to speak. And what made it more dangerous was the fact that this wasn't just about faith. It was about control. Across the continent, people believed that the devil just didn't tempt. He recruited and made pacts. And witches, those who supposedly served him, were everywhere. In the fields, in the woods, even your next door neighbor. And at first, those accused of witchcraft were mostly outsiders, people on the edge of society. But soon, even the quiet women with a garden of herbs, the midwife who assisted in a difficult birth, or the widow with no protector could be branded as a servant of evil. No one was safe. And why? Because fear needs a target, and authority needs a way to keep that fear pointed away from itself. In Germany, France, Switzerland, and Scotland, rumors grew louder than facts. A storm of accusations began to sweep across the rural villages and crowded towns alike. The belief that witches could cause illness, storms, and death wasn't questioned. It was accepted. And it was terrifying. But fear alone isn't what lit the match. Doctrine did that. In 1484, Pope Innocent VIII issued a decree called, I don't know how to say it, so I'm going to write it on the screen for you, but it's Latin for it's with greatest desire, or desiring supreme order. It's basically opened up the floodgates, claiming that witchcraft was a real threat to the faith, and he gave his blessings literally to the witch hunts. The book that was published that same year, the Malleus Maleficarum, became the go-to manual, and its pages led to centuries of torture, fear, and all in the name of God, especially for women. The book reads less like theology and more like a manual for fear. It laid out how to identify witches, how to extract confessions, and most disturbingly, why women were most likely to become witches in the first place. It describes women as more credulous, more impressionable, and more likely to seek carnal pleasures from demons. This was theology disguised as science, opinion disguised as truth, and it gave power to those who crave it. Clergy, judges, landowners, husbands, and neighbors. Soon, towns across Europe would begin rooting out witches, not metaphorically, but literally. The roots of paranoia had grown too deep, and the spark that lit them was now fanned by pages and clergy alike. Well, that was kind of intense, and if you lived back then, do you think that you would have been accused of witchcraft? I know I certainly would have, 100% no doubt. If you found this as interesting as I did, stay tuned because next week is part 2 of exposing the dark history of witches. But until then, I'm going to enjoy this herbal bread. Don't forget to subscribe if you like the video so you don't miss any, and if you have any suggestions on stories or eerie topics that you'd like me to cover or talk about, or recipes that you'd like me to make, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and bye for now, my spooky friends. This has got to be the best bread I've ever made. I love it.